My name's J.C. McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
And so until we can, as a group, as a community, look at ourselves and see what we're doing to ourselves, then none of the other stuff matters. None of the other stuff matters. So if anything that I would want to be is just a mirror. Look at me. My biological mother is a crackhead. Not was, is, today. My father can barely read and write. I graduated high school at 16, in the top 10 of my class.
Come on now.
It is not what you're given, it's what you choose to do with it.
Wow.
And not a lot of us don't know that those opportunities are out there because we see the death, we see the destruction. We see the poverty, we see the dirt, we see the crime, we see the underbelly of America. So when you have conservatives say, we want to conserve America, you're wondering why black people are looking at you like you're crazy. We don't want to conserve our America. The one we were born into is not one that is worth conservation. That needs restoration. And we have to be the ones that start that process.
Sonnie and Wayne, when, do you think there's a difference between the conservative market? When I say conservative market, I mean like Glenn Beck, Rush Limbaugh, and the market that you're trying, the people, the individuals that you're trying to reach, and how do you reach that audience in your own unique way? How do you do that, Sonnie?
Do I really have to answer that?
You don't have to.
No, it's joking to say that I kind of showed earlier what I do. I love, when I go to these conferences, what I try to tell conservatives, especially, and I mean white conservatives in this, is that you know how you got to conservatism. You know your road, whether it was paved through the church, whether it was paved through your parents, whatever road it is that got you there, you know your road. But I can guarantee you, I didn't get there on your road. My road took me a whole nother way to get here. But nonetheless, we end at the same destination. You can't be so hard-pressed to make everyone take your road. You have to understand that there are different avenues to get people to where it is that we want them to be. And that's what I do. I talk in front of tea parties all the time. I quote Jay-Z, I quote Kanye, I quote some of the rappers. If I said their names, the tea partiers would probably be like, oh. If I don't say their names and I just quote their lyrics, I get standing ovations. So you're trying to tell me that we're speaking two different languages. When I don't speak two different languages, you're not going to find one Sonnie here and then one Sonnie over there. I'm not one Sonnie in front of black people and then one Sonnie in front of white people. I am Sonnie all the time. When I get in front of a group and I'm talking and I say these quotes and I quote Jay-Z or I quote Kanye and I get these standing ovations, I have to wait to then go and tell people, you know you just clapped to Jay-Z, right? And the look on their face, you know, like, no I didn't. Oh yes, I can't help the poor if I'm one of them. So I get rich and gave back. To me, that's the win-win. Sorry, that's Jay-Z. Oh, what? Oh, yeah. They think, they're intelligent, they put it in their rhymes. We don't just listen to the bad, we also understand the good. We have a brain. Wow. We can differentiate what is good and what is not. We understand that the radio is run by the liberal media, progressives that run the radio stations. There are no conservative rap radio stations. Understand this, there aren't. All of the stations are progressive. So you get the songs that you get that the progressive radio wants you to hear. So when you listen to the radio and define that, that is progressive hip hop. All of it. They pick and choose what they want you to hear, and that's all you get. When you go into these albums, you start to hear what I'm talking about. These people are crying. They are crying. When they're telling you, I just buried another one of my brothers, you thinking they're like, oh, they're lifting up violence. No. So every single issue, they are crying out saying, listen, this has failed me. This system has failed me. This area has failed me. And I'm crying. I'm watching people die around me. I'm not seeing this greatness that you speak of. And all we can say in return is, that's just bad music. You never want to listen to them like they don't have something to say. They are trying to give you their stories. And guess what? Well, they're full of violence. They're full of sex. They're full of drugs. Have you been to our communities? The songs aren't causing this. The songs are a reflection of this. I saw my first dead body when I was 4 years old. It had nothing to do with the song. I would walk in on my father drunk out of his mind. It had nothing to do with the song. I would go to a crack house to pick my mother up, my biological mother up. It had nothing to do with a song. But when I listen to a song about these things, then it takes me back to that place where I can reflect on it. And I know that it's true, and I feel their pain, and I feel their agony, and that's why when I come out, I put it in the center of everything that I do. Because they say we don't hear from black youth. We don't, yes, but they're doing it over a beat. It's no less meaningful. That's right. They're still trying to tell you their story. They're trying to show you the inside of progressive cities in America. Where are the top cities? Progressivism was born in New York City. Where was hip-hop born? They had to come up with a method to complain, to tell people what was going on in their community. And what did they run on? They ran up on capitalism instead. While they were complaining, they ran up on capitalism. And they realized, wait, as 50 would say, I can get paid a penny for my thoughts. Wait a minute, let me start thinking. And then thinking came out to wax.
Hello, my name is Regina Roundtree, and I'm with W4 News. Tonight is our forum that we had on today's civil rights issue, crime, guns, and race. So, Sonnie, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm born and raised in Virginia, and all the time when I get to this point, the only thing I really want to say is I'm a mom of a beautiful daughter, and I'm a child of God. And those are two things that I want people to really know about me.
Beautiful. So on the panel today, you spoke a lot about the hip-hop culture, right, and how there are different roads to coming to conservatism. And I think what was most profound to me was when you talked about the culture and the lyrics in the rap, in the hip-hop music, which are really just a reflection of what's going on in the community. Speak to that just a little bit more, how you came to believe that.
I came to believe it by just growing up. When I was growing up, all of the things that you hear in rap songs, I saw in my daily life. So when I got of age, and I didn't listen to rap when I was young, my mom forbid it. And I was brought up on Christian and, you know, old school soul type of stuff. And I wasn't allowed to listen to hip hop. But all of the messages in hip hop I saw in my life. From my mother being addicted to drugs, my father could barely read or write. I had brothers going to jail. I lost so many friends. I had so many of my girlfriends getting pregnant. I saw the stories, and I didn't need hip hop to show them to me. And that's what led me to. These stories are more reflections than they are shapers. You know, if you grow up in a house with two parents that love you and worship you, it doesn't matter if you listen to hip hop. You're gonna turn out okay more than likely. But if you don't, you could have no hip hop, and you're still gonna have the drugs, the crime, and the violence, because that's what's being bred in our communities. If we wanna change our culture, then first and foremost, we have to change what's going on in our communities. The people will then change the culture.
Very good. And I think when you talked about listening to the lyrics, right, it's just young people voicing their concerns, right? And so where Ted Cruz can stand up, right, and give a speech at CPAC, we have Lecrae,
We
we have
have-
Jay-Z,
yeah.
you know, we have all these different artists doing this very same thing, but just over a beat.
And conservatives get upset, like, why should we care what Jay-Z has to say? Because they have millions of people that follow them. And when the president has no problem utilizing them, but you hold them and ostracize. And why would they come to our side? These are multimillionaires. These are grown men of industry. You're not going to put them at the kiddie table and expect them to come in. So you have to show them the respect that they have garnered throughout their careers and what they've done. If you don't want to look at the music, look at the business aspect of what they've done. These are not children that can be put at the children's table. So we have to build a table that we can invite them to. And then we'll get more and more tables as they realize they want to buy their own and build their own. And that's what I hope to accomplish.
Very good. One more thing before I let you go. So you should watch her on C-SPAN. We were recorded today, so we're excited about that. Look for that. What I thought you brought out, which is very important, is we claim the rights of the Constitution to keep ourselves out of trouble, but we don't know that they come from the Constitution.
Yeah.
I thought the way you brought that out and enlightened us about that was just phenomenal.
Well, thank you, but that's one thing we know. We know how to stop the police from getting to us. We gotta know the basic things about that, but we don't know where they come from. And then we have the people that we're voting for telling us that those things that we use as protection need to be taken away, and we'll be better off for it. And it's basically saying, like, just trust me. And I just ask the black community, do you trust the government? I don't care if it's a Democrat. I don't care if it's a Republican. Do you trust the government? If you can't trust the government, then put your faith in that document, because that document gives you individual freedom that's not dependent upon government. And that's the best kind of freedom you can have.
My name is Donna Liebman, advocate for the children and the community in Hartford. You are watching, and everyone is watching, Access TV. Explore, watch it, learn, like it, love it, inquire. Watch accesstv.org.
Okay, so in a few minutes we're gonna ask the panelists. Actually, the audience will be able to ask the panelists any questions that you'd like. There is an usher. I guess she's walking back and forth, and she has index cards, and so you can write your question. And after you're done, just bring it up, and we'll try to answer them. So I have a question for the panel. This is actually a question from earlier. Someone asked, why has no one on the panel addressed the racial disparities and an unjust system regarding the stand your ground laws? Don't you think that associating gun control with hip hop culture, I guess this is the second question. So the second question is, don't you think that associating gun control with the hip-hop culture and drug dealers feeds the stereotypical propaganda and fear that already exists?
Okay, I'll take it first. So, the whole conversation that we listened to this morning, you'd be hard-pressed to find a rapper that doesn't have a security guard. When they go into these spaces, they're not going in the black community without a security guard. Okay, they understand what is going on in their communities, and especially in communities that don't know them. We know, if I know my hood, that's all good. But I don't know Northside hood. So unless somebody in Northside invites me over, then I'm very cautious not to go over where they don't know who I am. Is that something wrong with me? No. That's how I was raised. Common sense of knowing where you are and where your boundaries are and what you can do. As far as with hip-hop goes, and what they do, and I'm trying to figure out the way that I want to come at this, because the negative stereotype, I've said it again, if you want to hear a bad gun song or kill 'em up song and it come on the radio, I'll shoot you out, blah, 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 blah. More than likely, that person has never really shot a gun, because the real ones who pull triggers don't talk about it. So I would really suggest that if you really are part of the culture, you really know that the ones who do the dirt don't go and sing about it after they finish doing it. And that's one thing that I would want to point out, that there's probably a lot of people who are saying they've done a lot of things that they didn't actually do. And just because it makes it on wax doesn't make it true. But when it's pushed out in front of us, we look at it like that is the depiction that we get. Is that like, and I say it like this, they use it to say monkeys can't have guns. And we're the monkeys. Look how we kill each other. Look. If we want to save the black community, first we must remove the gun. I could put a gun on this table right now and nobody in this room would die. Not a single person in this.
Hi, my name is Malachi Davis, and you're watching AccessTV.org. Watch it, like it, share it.
Welcome back. This is Regina Roundtree with W4 News, and we're here tonight, October 11th, at the Mark Twain Museum, just having a little celebration after our afternoon panel on today's civil rights issues, crimes, guns, and race. And I have with me a very distinguished man who I'm privileged to have met. His name is Professor Ken Blackwell. He is a board member, director of the National Rifle Association, with Family Research Council, a signatory on Right on Crime, just an amazing resume. So, Professor Blackwell, tell us how it is that you got on to be the NRA board.
Well, I've always been a defender of the Constitution, but I was blessed to be mayor of my hometown, Cincinnati, Ohio, and there were gun control initiatives that were advanced in the city, and as the political leader of the city, I stood in opposition to them. And I did it in a way that showed that I was first and foremost concerned about safety in our neighborhoods, but that I was a strong advocate for responsible gun ownership and safety measures. And so that got the attention of folks in Washington, I'm sure. But that was early on in my career, and subsequently I became much more active on the national scene. And a strong supporter of the NRA, and more importantly, or as important, the embrace of the Constitution that has been the basic source that has made us a most exceptional nation in world and human history.
When you think about all the varied other things that make up who is Professor Ken Blackwell, what are two things that are probably, that you'd like the audience to know about you that we didn't get to hear today?
Well, look, I grew up in a working class family. I had a grandmother who, when she sent me off to college, she pulled me out of a family dinner, told my mom and dad that she wanted to talk to me personally. And she said, son, look, we've raised you to master 3 books. And she said, if you've mastered those 3 books, you can go to that university and master anything they have in their library. She said, that's the date book, your checkbook, and most importantly, the good book. She said that date book tells how you spend your time and with whom you spend it. That checkbook tells how you leverage your resources and what your true values are. But that Bible will teach you to pick the path of conviction over the path of convenience. And I will tell you, mastering those 3 books and following the Word of God has helped me throughout my career and blessed me with a beautiful family, a wife now of 46, 47 years, and we were unique in Cincinnati history. Not any other couple has been mayor of the city and superintendent of the public school systems, but we've been able to do that. And I hope we've been able to bring some value to both of those positions.
What a wonderful role model and example. Thank you. Everyone, this is Professor Ken Blackwell. It is a pleasure to have you today. He came up from Ohio to Connecticut to be with us tonight.
Away your Fourth Amendment, and they don't need a warrant to search your house or to search your car. What about your Fifth Amendment, where they can make you testify against yourself and say that you did something because they didn't hit you over the head with a billy club enough times? If you think America is so bad for black people now, tell me and fathom me how bad will America be for black people if we don't have the Constitution. Now, upon the precipice of getting them to understand that slowly, one by one, they're taking away your rights. And they do it under, we're good to you. I am not a monkey. Give me my rights. I shoot very straight. I don't have to worry about not being able to control where I place my shot. I think before I speak. You don't have to worry about, monitoring what I have to say. I like private property, and no, you cannot search my car. I know my rights, and I will stand for them. If we can tell that, they don't even know that the reason you can't illegally search is because of the Fourth Amendment. How do you protect the Constitution when the very things that they rely on to get them out of sticky situations with the cops, they know that you can't search they don't know it comes from the Constitution. So we have to be the ones that connect those dots for them to let them see that these things are protecting you. Now, this is a document that provides that protection. I'm so sorry, my throat and my mouth, I apologize.
No, take it. All right, so we're going to have another question. Recently, I guess the driver's name is Lucre. Lucre, okay.
I love Lucre, anomaly.
So he's a conservative Christian hip hop artist.
Yes.
And recently he had the #1 song
yes.
In the country with positive lyrics. And so the question is, does this show a hunger in our culture for authentic, creative conservatives? Now that's for Sonnie, and I'm going to ask you a question, Wayne, just because this is a member of the RNC and a member of the conservative caucus is here, and they're saying you sound mad at us, and I want you to answer whether you're mad at the RNC. Okay, let Wayne go first.
Well, I know a couple of people at the RNC, and honestly, to tell you the truth, there are some things. I mean, believe me, I know people at the RNC, and I talk to them all the time. Yes, I'm not happy with the RNC because I don't feel like the RNC is going out into the community and doing what they should be doing. They're not. And I talked to a couple of other representatives. Can't call any names, okay? But I talked to them, and they let me know that they're trying their best. But every year or every 2 years after the elections, they say that they're going to do something, and it takes. And it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. The RNC, if they really cared, they would be out the day after the election in the communities, setting up these offices, renting out space, and staying in the community. And you don't have to do it with fanfare. You don't. Go into the community and stay there. Now, I talked to Chairman Priebus personally. I was like, your windows might be blown out. You might be protesting. Sharpton, Jackson, I can't bring up any names. Sharpton and Jackson might show up and protest. But if you stay there for a while and you let that community know that you care about them and you have some solutions and you have your little meetings and you go knock on them door to door, week to week, month to month, and you let them know that you're going to be there for the long haul, the black community or minorities community, they will protect you. They will defend you, and then you will show them that you mean what you say. These neighborhoods are like, well, you know, they come in here, they for these one-day rallies, and then they roll out. They come in here for these evening banquets with these $15,000 plate tables, hold up traffic, and then they roll out. These neighborhoods don't trust.
I have with me right now Professor Nicholas Johnson. He's the author of the book Negroes and the Gun, and he was phenomenal today. We could not have had the panel today without him and all the history. So, Professor, in 2 minutes, which is hard for a professor, right? Kind of tell us a little bit about The Gun, your book, and why you wrote it.
So the book, I just tried to chronicle a tradition that I knew about, but did not see reflected in lots of the literature that I had worked on and worked through. So I've been writing about gun issues for about 2 decades, and eventually I got a chance. I was actually invited to write an article, just a short piece, people said, to describe what I was telling people was this story out there that was under-recorded, and that short piece turned into this long book. What I'm happy about doing in the book is that I highlight a bunch of people who are really authentic American heroes, and people maybe don't know the names of Winston Hudson and Bob Hicks. Some of the more famous names people sort of know, people like Daisy Bates, but they don't associate Daisy Bates with armed self-defense. You go back and you read the biographies of these people, you look at the targeted research that people have done that is obscure, and I try to bring a lot of that research and those stories to light to show that black people were not always victims, that they like every other people in history, when they faced adversity, they stood up with a lot of grit and they fought back, and my book is part of a growing literature that I'm happy to be proud of.
I think one of the exciting things, I started reading your book, by the way. I downloaded it on my Kindle.
Excellent.
And it was great to be able to highlight it, and the pieces that I think you brought out in the panel today was the difference between the political violence, right, and self-defense. Sure.
And that turns out to be important because it helps us then understand how the modern civil rights movement clearly was nonviolent, but that nonviolent streak in the modern civil rights movement did not mean that people were laying down in instances where they were personally attacked. So the idea that one might legitimately use arms in self-defense when attacked in a private scenario was entirely consistent with the views of most of the people in the modern movement. So what I show is that over and over again, as a matter of both practice and of considered policy, of debate within the community, that dichotomy was embraced by Martin Luther King, was embraced by the NAACP, was embraced by virtually everyone else that you've ever heard of in the modern civil rights movement, and many people that you haven't heard of.
We having another book from you?
There are a bunch of books that I could pull out of the work that I did, and I was telling people in another talk recently that when you go back and look at the NAACP's magazine, The Crisis, from the early 20th century, it is just filled with stories that would fill another book. There are 2 or 3 other possibilities, and right now I'm trying to juggle other sorts of obligations, but there are at least 3 books that I would like to write if I ultimately have the time, and they're related to this one.
Great. So, Professor Nicholas Johnson from Pennsylvania.
From Pennsylvania, Fordham Law School, though, but I live in Pennsylvania, yes.
And he came up to Connecticut to join us today, so thank you, Professor.
Thanks for having me. It was a great event.
Why did you choose to fight for the conservative cause?
I got tired of watching bottle. My mom always talked about she had an inner mic, so she really didn't need a mic. No, I got tired of watching bottleneck politicians holding up new voices. Everywhere we go, we see new voices. We see young people that want to talk. that want to express themselves, that want to let people know that they are smart and that they, given the reins, that they can take over and be productive. The problem is when you're watching when you're watching these bottleneck politicians on TV, they've been on TV for the last 25, 30 years, saying the same thing every night, and especially now that news has become the echo chamber, so now you're hearing them 3 and 4 times a day, saying the same thing. You have young kids out here, you have that are educated, that have a new vision for America. But the bottlenecks, like I said, they're sitting at the table that they keep telling everybody that you ever see at. They're sitting in the seat. And that's one of the main reasons why I did this. And another reason why is because I spent 8 years in the military. I was in the Gulf War, I was in the United States Air Force. And that gave me clarity. Growing up as a young Christian son of a preacher, and then going into the military, patriotism. I love my country. And when you watch it be destroyed piece by piece by piece, when you look at the neighborhood, when you look at the government, when you look at the city council, that nobody's going to, except for the people that are quietly, I mean, the city council meetings are happening and nobody knows about them except for the people that's in charge, and the people that are in charge are writing the laws, or they're making the rules, and then when you go and mess up, well, I didn't know that. Well, there was a city council meeting.
Hi, I'm back again, Regina Roundtree, W4 News, and I have here with me a wonderful individual. His name is Richard Ivory from New York with Hip Hop Republican. He came out to help us today by moderating our social media and messaging forum. And so my question for you, my question for you, Richard, is, and you explained it so well at the panel, why Hip Hop Republican? Why did you create that?
So I created Hip Hop Republican as a means to provide a forum for conservatives who lived in urban areas, conservatives who lived in cities, who knew they were conservative but were surrounded by people who weren't. And so it was also a way for minorities who were conservatives to have a platform to talk about the things they believe and why they believe those things. And that's what HHR is about.
But you have had, not just writing, but you have been and had experience in the party and working. Kind of share a little bit of your background about, were you always a conservative? Were you always part of the party? How did you get there?
I wasn't always a Republican. I didn't grow up in a Republican or a Republican family. It was a conservative setting, but not a Republican setting. And it wasn't until after high school, and some years, maybe a few years after high school, did I consider, did it dawn on me that I might be Republican. And that was after hanging out with actually my liberal friends, and then a lot of them saying, you sound like a Republican. And I'd be like, well, what does a Republican sound like? Well, I don't know. That just sounds like common sense. And they're like, yeah, well, you're a Republican. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, whatever. And then I looked into the platform, and then I looked at some of the urban some of the urban problems that we were experiencing, and some of them that I saw growing up. And I realized that a lot of those problems were a direct result of policies, some of them by Republican, but most of them by Democrats. And often policies that were implemented for the bureaucrats and the government, but not for the people. And I felt myself more aligned with the conservative Republican side of politics than the left. And I just, at some point, made a decision to support the party. I'm not always happy with the party, and I think that the party has a long way to go. But the reason I'm so passionate about what I'm doing is because I believe that the only way for the party to get where it needs to be as as it tries to find its way, is that it's with cities and minorities. Cities and minorities will make the Republican Party more competitive, and it will make the Republican Party a strong party in the future. And I think also it will benefit the African American community and minority communities to have another party to consider.
So, sometimes when you moderate, you don't get a chance to hear how it comes across. So I'm going to ask you about the first panel, right, where we talked about Second Amendment rights, we talked about criminal justice reform, and we talked about that all in the contents of the Black community. So tell the audience 2 things that really stuck with you from the first panel.
I think from the first panel, what we got to see were 2 different forms of Black conservatism. You had the kind of patriotic, military conservative who's African American, and you got to see how he engages the conservative movement, and but at the same time tries to stay authentic to his community. And then you have a younger person with Sonnie, who comes from the hip hop generation, and yet is still conservative. She sees things from a different point of view on some issues. However, they both together bring something beautiful to the conservative movement. It brings what I might call an ethnic flavor to things that are often presented often in an old white schoolboy kind of old boy network kind of way. These 2 bring conservatism to an audience that might not have considered conservatism in the past, and so or the Republican Party in the past. So I think they are an attribute to the party. They are an attribute to the conservative movement, and it's important that not only them but many other voices like theirs that are not being heard are come out and are able to also present their thoughts and feelings.
Great. So, Richard Ivory, thank you for bringing some hip-hop flavor and Republican to Connecticut. We appreciate it. We'll be back with some more interviews.
One of the most detrimental people on our side as far as us pushing forward, I would say, would be Bill O'Reilly. For the reason he brings up these conversations. So he's not afraid to have these conversations. But what he does is he brings the left professors, the progressives, in there, and he asks them the same questions, and they always give him the same answers, and he always brings them back and asks them the same questions and gets the same answers. He does it every single time, which is one of the reasons I stopped watching his show completely. Because I, as a Black conservative, am tired of it. I am tired of it. And it doesn't have to be me. It could be somebody else. But where is your Black conservative that is passionate about the Black community? And why is that person never the one you bring on air? Never the one you bring on air. Every time you want a Black representative, one night he did this Black story, and this is just to give you why I feel such frustration to bring this up. He did this Black story about the degradation of the Black family and so forth and so on. And he brought in, after he finished, he brought in James Carville and Bob Beckel to talk about it. And it's funny, except I almost punched my TV. Because this is one of the largest, most far-reaching programs, the ability you would have to have this honest dialogue, this honest conversation. And we can't even get it on those who call themselves our side. You know, we can't, you would still rather give the time to the progressive who's going to tell you the same thing, and nothing is ever going to get solved.
Hi, I'm Councilwoman Cynthia Jennings, and everyone is watching accesstv.org. Share it, watch it, learn from it. We are very proud to have accesstv.org in Hartford.
Hello, everyone. And as you know, we are celebrating after our excellent forum that we had today. On today's civil rights issues, we talked about crimes, gun, and race. And I have here with me a wonderful gentleman that came up from Atlanta, Georgia, to be with us in Connecticut. So Bishop Hunt,
yes.
Tell us a little bit about your experience, because we brought you up specifically to speak about criminal justice reform and working with as people are re-entering the community, and then how do we deal with that and also deal with Second Amendment rights, and we're saying that everyone needs to use those, exercise that, but yet there's kind of an issue that holds back many people who come back into the community.
Well, yeah, it's a real almost a dichotomy. On one hand, we certainly know that we have Second Amendment rights. It's very, very important to us. I mean, they're inalienable rights, really, that we can know from God that we should have the right to protect ourselves. I mean, self-defense, those things are very, very vital. So in that regard, we know that in terms of a person having a weapon or whatever it might be, in particular in terms of guns, that we never want to take that away from the privilege of just being a United States citizen. But then beyond that, of course, we know there's the misuse of those weapons. And particularly when you're talking about the inner cities and the urban areas, what has happened is because there's been general lawlessness that comes from maybe single-family homes where maybe they don't have a father in the home, where right now 70% of black children are born to out of wedlock, where you only have 1 out of 3 children that actually have a two-parent home. So with that situation, it's dire. And so with those levels, it's not even just not submitting to authority, it's actually resisting authority. So with that comes the whole thing of a weapon becomes a part of their point of manhood. Yeah, I have my weapon. I might do drugs. I might commit crimes, or whatever. But I have my weapon to prove that no one's gonna come on me. And so it's a whole different thing, as opposed to for sports or for protection. So we have to relearn this whole process where we can teach young people in terms of how to deal with weaponry. But of course, that's first when you deal with them how to respect life. And that's one of the things really important to me. I was on the parole board for Georgia, and I was looking at these people that had come from juvenile system, graduated up to the adult system. But what happened is they started trouble there, but most of the time when they got in trouble, as they became older, they became involved with adult crimes and with some kind of weapon. And for the parole board, that was a big alarm, because once we saw a weapon there, then that usually meant more time you spend in prison. Now, it did not necessarily mean the crime was a violent crime, but just the existence of the weapon. So yeah, so all those things have to be brought into concern right now as we deal with it. Now, I want to be clear with it. I'm not talking all about gun control. I'm talking about self-control. Right. And that's really what we have to deal with. How do we deal with our own actions, taking responsibility to make the right choices as it relates to, if I have a gun, my heart is right, so I wouldn't dare take a life because I just want to get something they have. Or back them down off me. No, sir. We understand taking a life is too very important.
So I think it's interesting how you got to this point, right? Because we call you Bishop Garland Hunt, right? And you were appointed onto Georgia State, right? Pardon and paroles. But how did you get to become a conservative, a Republican? Tell us a little bit about how that happened.
I've been living life to an extreme. I went to Howard University undergrad and law school, and in undergrad, I mean, I was over here far left. I mean, I was student government, so we brought in Louis Farrakhan, Stokely Carmichael, Angela Davis. At that time, Congressman.
You've met all of them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because student government, we brought them in, so we spent time with them. I mean, and even the ones that we thought were too lukewarm were people like Jesse Jackson and those guys, because they feel like, they just sellouts. So that's where we were. So the point I'm making is most of my friends were either black nationalists, they were either Marxists, they either went to Nation of Islam or even Sunni Muslims. So here I am, a Christian. And I didn't give my life to the Lord until like my junior year, but I was this Christian supposedly with all these different worldviews. But as my heart began to break, And I really realized, man, my life needs to center around my love for Christ. So that's how I started looking to see, well, these people that say this, they don't believe what I believe. So I moved from the left to something a lot more conservative. And that's when I found a greater home in the Republican Party. Because even abortion, I realized that's murder. And no one even was there. I didn't see any teachings. I wasn't around anybody that told me that. But I knew inherently, how are you going to kill a baby in the womb? So that within itself, I'm saying, wait a minute. So it began to change my politics. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I wasn't even, I hated Jews. Because I'm saying, man, these guys took over the Palestinians. But then I realized, wait a minute, God loves the Jews. So I had to change even my political perspective. So that's what brought me into understanding the conservative Bible. Now, let me just say, I'm first Christian even now, but I just happened to also find my home in a conservative Republican environment. So that's how I came to it.
Great. Everyone, this is Bishop Garland Hunt from Atlanta, Georgia. He joined us tonight, and we are so pleased to have you with us. And we're going to bring you back. We're going to bring you back. Okay. And I'll be right back after this minute.
And I realized that sitting in the room with these great speakers this morning, just talking, sharing about our history and who we are and how we got to this place, I wanted the world to see how beautiful that our community is and how diverse we are. We are not just all Jay-Z. We are not all Ben Carson. We are not, all Barack Obama. We are diverse and beautiful and intelligent and thoughtful and kind. And our urban communities get trapped in some cycles that just as one individual, they cannot change by themselves. And I believe that this was an opportunity to share with the world, right, what we think as far as conservatives on center-right, right of center, where we think, some of the issues are, what some of the concerns are, share with you the complexities and the layers of our community. And so if you walk away with nothing else, just understanding that the urban community is complex. There are a lot of underbelly issues that have to be addressed, and that just, throwing down the Constitution and saying that's going to solve it is not enough if you don't explain, if you don't educate, if we don't change policies that make it easier for people and children to learn about it in schools and learn about it at home and understand that it is the foundation of who we are as America. But as Sonnie pointed out, the America that some young people are experiencing and older people in the urban community is not one that they want to save. It needs to be changed. It needs to be renewed. It needs to be done over. But we don't throw away the people when we're doing that process.
So I have with me another panelist speaker. His name is Reverend Dean Nelson. He came up from Virginia to join us today. And I have a special connection to Dean. As you know, we started in Connecticut a chapter of the Frederick Douglass Foundation. And I have here with me one of the co-founders of the Frederick Douglass Foundation, Reverend Dean Nelson. So Dean, tell our audience, if you will, kind of how you thought today's panel was important to what you do with the Frederick Douglass Foundation, but also what you do with the other organizations that you work with.
Super. Well, thanks, Regina. I thought it was an excellent panel. For me, as you know, the Frederick Douglass Foundation, what we stand for is righteousness and justice, liberty and virtue. And so today's panel was extremely important because the issue of crime, particularly in urban communities, the issue of guns, comes up all the time, and it seems like that there's only kind of one narrative that we hear. And so today, I think, was refreshing to be able to hear a diverse group of panelists talking about this issue from a way that is in sync with the Constitution, a way that historically was accurate for our people as African Americans, and even for me as a minister of the gospel, talking about it in a way that connects this issue to our community, because for a long time we haven't really talked seriously about what I think is extremely important, and that's the value of life. I wrote a piece not long ago called "The Value of Black Life," after what we've seen in Ferguson as well as in Sanford, I think that there should be a discussion about that, but not just talking about it from the context of young men who may be murdered or men that may be shot and killed, but from the context of life from, beginning to end, and particularly that of the issue of abortion. Most people don't recognize how in 3 generations ago a black woman, for instance, was the least likely of any demographic group to get an abortion, but today, 33% roughly of all abortions are performed on African American women. And so we need to have this discussion of the value of life, and I believe that today we were able to discuss that in meaningful ways.
Wonderful. I think one of the things, as you were talking about the value of life and we were talking about Second Amendment rights, we also got a chance to bring the Bible in, right? And that doesn't happen, right? When you're talking about guns, that we actually talk about Christ and how the Bible speaks to defending yourself, about lifting up the sword. Can you expound a little bit more on Luke and what you brought forth on the panel?
Sure. Well, yeah, it's really important, and because I am a minister, I started getting interested in this particular issue, and so is there a defense for the use of weapons? And I think in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, as affirmed by Christ, there is. There's always been a place for protection. And I think that scripture you were speaking about in Luke 22, where Jesus actually encouraged his disciples to actually go and purchase weapons when they were faced with the potential of Jesus being taken and the soldiers actually coming to fight them. Now Jesus did encourage and rebuked Peter when he took a sword and took off the ear, of one of the soldiers' servants. So I think that the application in that context is that it's completely consistent with Scripture to have weapons to defend yourself, but not to use it as an offense to take the life or to injure somebody, but to use it in a defensive posture. And so it's really it's a good debate that needs to be had within our community. But I think people, even historically within our communities, whether it's Dr. King or other civil rights advocates that promoted nonviolence, but yet many of them from the South always had guns to protect them. And I think sometimes the narrative today kind of confuses that issue.
The push and pull that happens in our communities, right? When we're trying to deal with crime, the first thing we go to is gun violence. But the 2 situations that you explained about the 2 different pastors, tell them about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think it's important again for us to be able to have these discussions. I live in Washington D.C. area, and I know pastors that, on the one hand, some of them, in their congregations on Sunday morning in their boot, they've got, a gun, they've got a pistol, down in there, and they don't have a problem with that. But at the same time, I've got good friends that are huge advocates for, things like, gun buying programs where they buy back guns to get guns off the streets. So I think that the point is that there's a need for a meaningful discussion and for ministry leaders to be involved and to be engaged with whatever approach that they take. The goal is to serve and to protect our communities, and I think too often in these discussions what is forgotten are those who are victimized by people within our communities. And so if there are ways that we can, teach and train, our people to properly use firearms, or if there are ways that we can, combat, the challenges in urban communities by getting, guns out of the hands of criminals, I think that those are both approaches that can be taken. It's not necessarily either or, but it could be a both and.
My good friend and consult here, Reverend Dean Nelson with the Frederick Douglass Foundation came up from Virginia today to be with us on our panel.
We travel a lot. We see the older people sitting in the airports on their phones saying rape. Social media is very important for what we're doing. I just heard that some state is getting ready to use electronic voting. From your home.
No, not yet.
I just heard that. I was like, wait a minute. I mean, y'all are really playing with fire now.
Yeah, I know.
Russia's already hacking stuff. You want to have Ronald McDonald as the next president. And everybody's gonna realize, how did he win by 67 points?
Everyone, I just want to thank you so much for joining us this evening. We had a wonderful time. We had great panelists. We're very excited. Our whole panel was recorded by C-SPAN. So if you go to our website later on, CTFDF.org, or you can go to CBRAC's website, CTBRAC.org, and we'll be sure to let you know when it'll start to air on C-SPAN. This is Regina Roundtree with W4 News. Have a good night.